The first thing I noticed was the amount. $180,000. The second thing I noticed was that the check had my name on it. And the third thing was the sentence printed across the letter that made absolutely no sense. Final settlement of your previously submitted claim. I had never submitted a claim. Not for $180,000. Not for $18,000. Not even for $180. I was sitting at my kitchen table on a Tuesday morning when I opened the envelope from Westbridge Mutual. I'd been expecting my normal homeowner's insurance renewal documents. Instead, there was a cashier-style settlement check, several pages of legal paperwork, and a letter addressed to me personally. The check was dated August 11th. The claim number was listed underneath it. I stared at it for nearly a minute before calling my husband. He was already at work. When he answered, I said, "You need to come home." He immediately asked if something was wrong. I said, "I just received a check for $180,000. There was a pause. Then he laughed. Not because it was funny. Because he thought I was joking. "I'm serious." "From who?" "My insurance company." Another pause. "Did we sell something?" "No." "Did you file something?" "No." "Then don't deposit it." I wasn't planning to. I looked at the paperwork again. The claim was apparently related to a property I had never heard of. The address was in a town about 90 miles from where we lived. The property name was written at the top of one document. Hawthorne Creek Estate. That name meant nothing to me. At least, I thought it did. I called Westbridge Mutual. After being transferred 3 times, I finally reached a claims representative named Tessa. I gave her the claim number. There was silence while she typed. Then she said, "Ms. Bellamy, I see the claim." "That's good, because I don't." Another pause. "I'm sorry. I never filed this." Tessa asked me to confirm my date of birth. I did. She asked me to confirm my current address. I did. Then she asked something that made me uncomfortable. "Do you recognize the address 418 Hawthorne Creek Road?" "No." She paused again. "The claim was submitted under your policy." "That's impossible." "I understand." "No, I mean literally impossible. I've never owned a house there. You may have been listed as an interested party. I don't even know what that means." She told me she needed to transfer me to the special claims department. That was when I became suspicious. Insurance companies don't usually transfer you to a special department because of a normal mistake. I waited. A man named Victor answered. He didn't sound confused. He sounded cautious. He asked me whether I had received the settlement check. "Yes." "Have you deposited it?" "No." "Good." That word bothered me. "Why?" "We need to verify some information before you take any action." "What information?" He wouldn't tell me. Instead, he asked whether my father was named Harold Bellamy. I stopped breathing for a second. "Yes." "Was he deceased?" "Yes." "When did he pass away?" 7 years ago. Victor said, "I'm sorry." I thanked him automatically. Then he asked another question. "Did your father ever own property near Hawthorne Creek?" I said no, but I wasn't completely sure. My father had been a quiet man. He had owned a small house outside town and a piece of farmland that he sold before I was married. As far as I knew, that was everything. Victor said, "I'm going to send you a secure copy of the original claim documentation." "Why?" "Because you need to see it." That sentence stayed with me. You need to see it. Not "we'll correct the mistake." Not "we'll cancel the payment." See it. I received the documents less than 10 minutes later. There were 17 pages. The first page was the insurance claim. The policyholder name was mine. The signature looked like mine. My middle initial was even included. But the date was from 4 years earlier. I remembered exactly where I had been that week. My husband and I had been in Colorado for our anniversary. We had hotel receipts, photos, credit card statements. I couldn't possibly have filed an insurance claim from Arizona for a property I didn't own. Then I reached page 7. It contained photographs of the insured property. A large white house surrounded by trees. A detached garage, a long stone driveway, and an old wooden fence running beside a creek. I stared at the photograph. Something about the house felt familiar. Not the building itself. The porch. The windows. The way the roof sloped toward the back. I couldn't explain it. I turned to the next photograph. It showed a stone fireplace inside the house. There was a brass clock sitting on the mantel. I knew that clock. My father had one exactly like it. I got up from the table. I walked to the hallway where we kept an old box of his belongings. I opened it. At the bottom was a photograph of my father standing beside a younger version of the same brass clock. I turned the photograph over. On the back, my father had written, Hawthorne Creek, 1996. I sat down hard. For the first time that morning, I realized the check might not have been sent to me by mistake. My father had known that property. Maybe he had even owned it. I called Victor back. This house belonged to my father, didn't it? He was silent. Then he said, according to the claim records, yes. I felt my stomach tighten. Why didn't I know about it? That isn't something I can answer. What happened to the property? We're still reviewing that. And the $180,000? That amount represents the final insurance settlement. For what? Victor hesitated. Property damage. What kind? Fire-related damage. My hands went cold. When? For years ago. The exact week I had been in Colorado. I looked at the photograph again. The house. The clock. The fireplace. My father. Everything suddenly felt connected. But then Victor said something that made the entire situation even stranger. Miss Bellamy, there is one other issue. What? The claim wasn't filed by your father. I waited. Then who filed it? We don't know. I stared at the check sitting on my kitchen table. Someone filed a claim using my identity on a property connected to my father, and now you're sending me $180,000. Yes. Why would anyone do that? Victor didn't answer. Instead, he said, because the property was never supposed to be transferred to you. I froze. What do you mean? The ownership dispute was settled years ago. Then why am I receiving the money? Another silence. Then Victor said, because according to the original insurance policy, you were named as the beneficiary. I looked at the check again. For 7 years, I had believed my father left me a modest house, some furniture, and a few old photographs. Now an insurance company was telling me that somewhere in the middle of all that, my father had left me a property I had never known existed. And someone had already tried to collect money from it using my name. I asked Victor one final question. Who currently owns Hawthorne Creek Estate? His answer made me wish I hadn't asked. That's the problem, Miss Bellamy. The county records say you do. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. The county records say I own it? Yes. But you just told me the ownership dispute was settled years ago. It was. Then how can I own the property? Victor said, that's what we're trying to determine. I looked at the insurance documents scattered across my kitchen table. The $180,000 check was still sitting there. I suddenly didn't want to touch it. Can you send me the ownership records? I can send you everything we have related to the claim. Please do. He said he would. Before hanging up, I asked one more question. Victor, who filed the original claim? We have a name. Whose? Your name. That isn't what I mean. I know. He hesitated. There's a second name attached to the filing. Who? Harold Bellamy. My father's name. I closed my eyes. My father was dead when the claim was filed. I understand. Then somebody used both our names. Yes. That was the moment I stopped thinking about the $180,000. I started thinking about why someone would create a fake claim involving my dead father and a property I didn't know I owned. By the time my husband, Nolan, came home, I had printed everything. He stood in the doorway and looked at the papers. So this is real? I nodded. He picked up the photograph of Hawthorne Creek Estate. That's the house. Yes. Your father owned this? Apparently. He studied the picture. Then he looked at me. Have you ever seen this place? No. Are you sure? I've never been there. He was quiet. Then he pointed to the photograph. Your father is standing on that porch. I know. And the date says 1996. Right. Nolan looked at me carefully. Why would he never tell you? That was exactly what I had been asking myself. My father wasn't secretive about money. He was careful, but not mysterious. He had always told me what I needed to know. When my mother died, he handled everything himself. When he retired, he showed me every financial document. When he sold his farmland, he told me months before the sale. So why would he hide an entire property? I opened the box of his belongings again. There were old tax receipts, photographs, bank statements, and letters. Nothing mentioned Hawthorne Creek. Then I found a small envelope tucked inside an old book. There was no address, no stamp, just my name. I opened it. Inside was a single photocopy of a county document. The top read, Transfer of Property Interest. The property address was 418 Hawthorne Creek Road. The grantor was Harold Bellamy. The recipient was me. The date was 6 months before my father died. I stared at the document. My father had transferred the property to me. But why hadn't I known? Then I noticed something else. The transfer had never been filed publicly. There was a handwritten note at the bottom. Do not record until instructed. I showed Nolan. He read it twice. Who wrote that? I don't know. I recognized my father's handwriting on the signature. But the note underneath wasn't his. That meant someone else had been involved. The next morning, I drove to the county recorder's office. I brought the documents from the insurance company. The clerk searched the address. She frowned. That's an unusual file. Why? It has multiple ownership records. She pulled up the history. The property had originally belonged to a man named Everett Bellamy, my grandfather. I had never heard him mentioned in connection with Hawthorne Creek. The property passed to my father in 1987. Then something happened in 1997. Ownership transferred to a company called Hawthorne Land Holdings. I recognized the date immediately. A year after the photograph of my father at the property. Who owned Hawthorne Land Holdings? The clerk searched. The corporation was dissolved. When? 2003. What happened to the property? That's complicated. She pulled another document. According to this filing, the property was supposed to return to your father. Supposed to? Yes. But did it? No. I looked at her. Then who owned it? She showed me the next record. The answer was a name I didn't recognize. Marlowe Pierce. Who is that? An attorney. Did he own the property? Technically, no. What does technically mean? He was listed as trustee. For whom? She searched again. There's no beneficiary listed. That made no sense. I asked for copies of everything. The clerk printed nearly 40 pages. On my way home, I called an attorney recommended by a friend. Her name was Elise Garner. She reviewed the documents that afternoon. After 20 minutes, she looked up. This isn't a normal property transfer. What is it? Your father placed the property into a trust. Why? That part isn't clear. Can I access the trust? Possibly. She pointed to the original filing. There's an unusual clause here. What does it say? The property could not be sold, transferred, or mortgaged without the written consent of two people. Who? She showed me the names. Harold Bellamy and Marlowe Pierce. My father's name was crossed out. Beside it was another handwritten name. Mine. I stared at it. So I was the second person? Yes. But I never signed anything. That's because the document was designed to activate after your father's death. I felt a chill. What does that mean? Your father retained control while he was alive. After his death, you became the beneficiary. Then why didn't I know? Elise leaned back. Because someone didn't want you to know. I looked at her. Who? We need to find out. She asked me whether I had ever heard of Marlowe Pierce. I hadn't. She searched her records. Pierce had been a respected attorney in the area. He specialized in trusts and property disputes. He had represented my grandfather decades earlier. He had also represented my father. But he had retired 12 years ago. Elise called his old office. The receptionist told her he had moved to Oregon. We decided to contact him. Before we could, someone knocked on my front door. It was a woman I'd never seen before. She was probably in her late 60s. She introduced herself as Vivian Cross. I knew your father, she said. I immediately became cautious. How? He helped my family. With what? She looked past me toward the kitchen table. I see you've found the documents. I didn't invite her inside. How do you know about them? Because I was there when your father signed them. My heart started beating faster. You knew about Hawthorne Creek? Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Because your father asked me not to. Why? She looked at me for several seconds. Because he believed someone would try to take the property from you. Who? She shook her head. He didn't know. Then why hide it? Because the property wasn't the important part. I didn't understand. What was? The land underneath it. I stared at her. She continued. Hawthorne Creek isn't valuable because of the house. Then why? There is water beneath that property. I almost laughed. Water. An underground aquifer. I had never heard of it. Vivian explained that years earlier, a private development company had discovered that the property sat above an unusually large groundwater reserve. Several neighboring parcels had already been purchased. Hawthorne Creek was the missing piece. If the developer gets that land, she said, they can control access to the entire water basin. I looked at the county records. So my father was protecting the land. Yes. From whom? Vivian hesitated. A company called Redstone Development. I wrote the name down. Then she said something else. Your father refused to sell. Why? Because the offer wasn't really for the property. What was it for? Access. I didn't understand. Vivian explained that Redstone had been buying parcels surrounding Hawthorne Creek for years. The company needed one final access agreement. My father's property was blocking it. That still doesn't explain the insurance claim. No. Then what does? Vivian looked directly at me. The fire. What fire? The fire that created your $180,000 claim. I felt my stomach drop. You know about the fire? I was there. What happened? She took a breath. Someone burned the old barn. I looked at her. When? For years ago. The same year the insurance claim was filed. Yes. Was the house damaged? No. Then why was there a $180,000 settlement? Because the claim wasn't for the house. I suddenly understood. What was burned? Vivian looked toward the street. Records. I felt cold. What records? Your father's records. She told me my father had kept old surveys, water rights documents, geological reports, and correspondence related to the land. After he died, those records remained in a locked storage room on the property. For years ago, the barn caught fire. Most of the records were destroyed. The insurance company paid $180,000 for the documented value of the lost materials. But Vivian said there was one problem. The insurance claim had been filed before the fire. I stared at her. What? The claim paperwork was prepared weeks before the fire. I couldn't speak. Someone had known the barn was going to burn. And someone had already prepared an insurance claim using my name. Vivian reached into her purse. She pulled out a small photograph. It showed the old barn before the fire. On the back was a handwritten date. Then she handed me a second photograph. This one had been taken the day before the fire. A man was standing near the barn. His face was partially turned away. But I recognized the jacket. It belonged to someone I had seen before. Marlo Pierce, the retired attorney who had been listed as trustee of my father's property. Vivian looked at me. Your father trusted him. I looked at the photograph. Then at the $180,000 check sitting on my table. For the first time, I realized the money might not be compensation for something that had already happened. It might be payment for something someone had been planning for years. I couldn't stop staring at the photograph. Marlo Pierce was standing beside my father's barn the day before it burned. For years, I had never heard his name. Now his name was connected to my father's property, an unrecorded trust, an insurance claim filed under my identity, and a fire that destroyed records worth $180,000. It was too many coincidences. I asked Vivian, how certain are you that that's him? I'm certain. Did you see him there? No. Then how do you know? Because I took the photograph. I looked up. You took this? Yes. Why? Your father asked me to document anyone who came onto the property. Why was he worried? Vivian hesitated. Because people had started asking questions about the water. I sat down. What kind of questions? Who owned the mineral rights? Who controlled access? Whether the property could be sold without your father's approval. Did my father think someone was trying to take it? He knew someone was. I looked at the photograph again. What happened after the fire? Pierce disappeared from the area. Did you report him? To whom? The police. Vivian gave me a tired smile. The fire department ruled it accidental. Why? Electrical fault. Was it? No. How do you know? Because the electrical system had been disconnected 6 months earlier. I felt my stomach tighten. I called Elise. She came over that evening. I showed her everything. She examined the photographs carefully. This could change the entire case. What case? Potential insurance deception, property interference, possible breach of trust. Can I get the $180,000 canceled? Don't touch the money yet. I haven't. Good. She looked at the insurance documents. There's something strange here. What? The insurer didn't pay for the house. I know. Vivian said it was for records. No. Elise pointed to the claim. Look at the insured property description. I leaned closer. It didn't say personal property. It said historical documents and associated proprietary materials. I frowned. What does that mean? It means the insurance company believed these documents had a specific financial value. How would they know? Someone provided an inventory. Who? She turned the page. The inventory was signed by Marlo Pierce. I felt a chill. He filed the claim. Apparently. Using my name. Yes. And my father's? Yes. Why? Elise didn't answer. Instead, she asked, do you know what was actually inside that barn? Apparently old property records. That's what we've been told. What else could there be? She pointed to a line on the inventory. Geological survey materials. I looked at her. What does that mean? Maps. Maps of what? Water. I remembered Vivian's words. The land underneath the house. The aquifer. I suddenly understood why those documents mattered. The papers weren't valuable because they were old. They contained information about something underneath the property. And if Redstone Development really wanted access to the water basin, those records could be extremely valuable. I asked Elise to investigate Redstone. She returned 2 days later with a thick folder. Redstone Development had purchased 23 parcels surrounding Hawthorne Creek over 12 years. Every purchase was made through different subsidiaries, different names, different addresses. But the same registered agent appeared repeatedly. Marlowe Pierce. I stared at the documents. So he was working for them. Maybe, we need proof. Then Elise showed me something else. A corporate filing from 4 years ago. Redstone had proposed a major residential development called Willow Basin. The project depended on obtaining water rights from a specific underground basin. The basin's boundary crossed Hawthorne Creek. Without my property, the project would be severely restricted. I asked the question I already knew the answer to. Did Redstone know my father owned the property? Yes. Did they know I inherited it? Yes. Then why didn't they just offer to buy it? They did. How much? $2.4 million. I stared at her. My father refused. Several times. And after he died? The offers stopped. That didn't make sense. If they knew I had inherited the property, why wouldn't they make me an offer? Elise looked at me. Because they believed you didn't know you owned it. That explained everything. If I didn't know about the property, they could wait. Eventually, someone would discover the old trust. Or the county would resolve the ownership issue. Or the property would become abandoned. But then the insurance claim appeared. I looked at the check. Why $180,000? Elise said, that's what we need to find out. That evening, I searched through my father's belongings again. This time, I wasn't looking for the property. I was looking for anything related to water. I found an old notebook. Inside were handwritten measurements. Depth, pressure, flow rate, dates, coordinates, and one phrase repeated several times. Do not sell access. I showed Elise. She immediately recognized the significance. These aren't random notes. What are they? Your father was monitoring the aquifer. Why? Because someone was trying to measure it. Redstone. Possibly. Then we found a name. Not Redstone. A government water surveyor. Nathaniel Cross. I knew the surname. Vivian Cross. I called her. She answered on the first ring. Where did you find that name? My father's notebook. She was silent. Vivian? Nathaniel was my husband. I sat down. He worked with my father? Yes. What did they discover? Not what you think. Then tell me. She took a breath. The aquifer wasn't the real secret. I looked at Elise. What was? The water was moving. What does that mean? Underground water isn't supposed to move in the direction your father discovered. She explained that the aquifer connected to a much larger underground system. If someone drilled in the wrong location, they could redirect water away from several communities. My father had discovered evidence that Redstone's proposed development could potentially affect the water supply. So my father wasn't protecting a property. No, he was protecting the water. Yes. I suddenly understood why he had refused millions of dollars. He wasn't being stubborn. He was afraid of what would happen if the land changed hands. But then another question came to me. If my father knew all this, why didn't he tell me? Vivian answered quietly. Because you were his daughter. I didn't understand. He wanted you completely outside of it. Then why leave the property to me? Because eventually someone would have to own it. And he trusted me? He trusted you not to sell it without understanding what it was. I looked down at the notebook. Then I saw a page I'd missed. At the bottom was a date. August 18th. That was today's date. Below it were 6 words. Give her the blue folder. I looked at Vivian. What blue folder? She closed her eyes. I was hoping you wouldn't find that yet. Find what? She reached into her bag and pulled out a blue folder. My father had given it to her 7 years earlier. She had been instructed to give it to me only after I received the insurance payment. I stared at her. You knew I'd received the $180,000? Yes. How? Your father planned it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My father arranged an insurance claim before he died? No. Then what? He purchased the policy. When? 2 months before his death. I looked at the paperwork. The policy had been created specifically to protect the records. But the claim had been filed 4 years later. That meant someone had waited years before using the policy. My father had anticipated the records might be destroyed. But he hadn't anticipated the claim would be filed in my name. Or maybe he had. I opened the blue folder. Inside was a letter. My father's handwriting. This time, there was no confusion. It was addressed directly to me. Claire, if you are reading this, something happened to the property after I was gone. Do not trust the first person who tells you the land is worthless. Do not sell it. And most importantly, do not assume the person who appears to have taken the property is your enemy. There are 2 people I trusted. One protected the land. The other protected you. If one of them is Marlowe Pierce, Ask him why he signed the insurance claim. If he tells you the truth, you will know who to trust. I read the letter twice. Then I looked at Elise. Where is Marlo Pierce? She already knew what I was going to ask. He's in Oregon. Then we're going. But before we could leave, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. I answered. A man's voice said, if you're going to see Pierce, don't tell him you found the blue folder. I froze. Who is this? You don't need to know. How do you know about the folder? Because your father asked me to protect it. Who are you? He ignored the question. There's something you haven't understood yet. What? The $180,000 wasn't paid because the records were destroyed. I looked at the check. Then why? Because someone insured the records for a reason. What reason? The man paused. Because the records weren't evidence of what happened. They were evidence of what was going to happen. The line went dead. I stared at the phone. Elise asked, who was it? I don't know. Then my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text. One sentence. Ask Pierce who really owns the water. We left for Oregon the following morning. I barely slept the night before. The anonymous caller's words kept repeating in my head. Ask Pierce who really owns the water. I didn't know what that meant. Water rights weren't something I'd ever thought about before this week. To me, owning land meant owning the house, the driveway, maybe the trees around it. I had never considered that someone could own what was underneath the land. Elise spent most of the flight reading through property statutes and old county records. I spent the time looking at my father's letter. The more I read it, the more convinced I became that he had known something would happen after he died. But there was one sentence I couldn't understand. Do not assume the person who appears to have taken the property is your enemy. That sounded like a warning about Marlo Pierce. Maybe Pierce hadn't stolen anything. Maybe he'd been protecting something. But if that was true, why had he signed the insurance claim using my name? We arrived in Portland shortly after noon. Marlo Pierce lived in a small coastal town about an hour and a half away. His house was nothing like I expected. No mansion. No expensive gate. No security system. Just a modest gray house with a narrow porch and a garden that looked like someone had spent decades taking care of it. An older woman answered the door. She looked at Elise. Then at me. Her expression changed immediately. You're Harold's daughter. I nodded. She stepped aside. He knew you'd come eventually. I stopped. Who are you? June Pierce. Marlo's wife. I looked at Elise. June gave a tired smile. Come in. We entered a quiet living room filled with books. There were no expensive decorations. No signs of a wealthy attorney. Just shelves. Thousands of books. June led us down a hallway. Marlo was sitting beside a large window. He looked much older than he had in the photograph. His hair was completely white. His left hand was trembling slightly. When he saw me, he didn't look surprised. He looked relieved. You have the blue folder, he said. I stopped. How did you know? Because Harold told me you would. You knew my father expected me to come here? Yes. Then why didn't you contact me? Marlo looked down. Because I was afraid. Of what? Of making your father's fears come true. I sat across from him. Elise remained standing. I placed the insurance documents on the table. Did you file this claim? Yes. Using my name? Yes. Why? Because the policy required a beneficiary. I never signed anything. You didn't need to. That doesn't answer my question. Marlo looked at me. The claim was necessary. For $180,000? For the records. Why would records be insured for that much? Because the information contained in them was worth considerably more. I thought about the aquifer. The water. He nodded. Yes. Who owns it? He looked toward the window. That's the question your father spent the last decade of his life trying to answer. I leaned forward. Tell me. Marlo took a slow breath. The water itself isn't owned by one person. Then what does Redstone want? Control. Through the property? Through access. He explained that groundwater rights in the region were complicated. Different landowners had different rights to extract water. But Hawthorne Creek sat on a critical recharge zone. Rain and snowmelt entered the ground there and eventually fed a much larger underground basin. If someone controlled enough of the recharge land, they could influence how the water was extracted and managed. Redstone wasn't simply trying to build houses. They were trying to control the infrastructure that would supply those houses. And my father's property is the last parcel they need. Yes. Then why didn't they buy it from him? Because he refused. Why didn't they buy it from me? Marlo looked at me. Because they thought you were easier to control than your father. I felt anger rise. How? They assumed you didn't know about the property. That was true. They expected the trust to eventually become inactive. Why? Because there was a condition. What condition? The property would remain protected as long as you didn't sell it. I frowned. So if I sell it, what happens? That's what they want. Why? Because the moment you sell, the restrictions disappear. I stared at him. Then why did you help hide the property from me? Marlo looked genuinely ashamed. Because your father asked me to. I couldn't believe it. You kept me from knowing I own land worth millions because my father told you to? Yes. He had no right. I know. That answer surprised me. You agree? Yes. Then why did you do it? Because Harold was dying. The room became silent. Marlo explained that my father had learned he had a serious heart condition. He knew he didn't have much time. He also knew Redstone was becoming increasingly aggressive. He was afraid that if I learned about the property immediately after his death, I would be approached with offers before I understood what I was actually selling. So you hid it? Yes. For 7 years. Yes. That's insane. It may have been. I stood up. My father made decisions for me my entire life. Marlo didn't argue. He thought he was protecting you. He made me unknowingly own a property that could affect an entire water basin. Yes. And then he left you instructions to keep me in the dark. Yes. I walked toward the window. Outside, rain was beginning to fall. I thought about the $2.4 million offer. It suddenly seemed insignificant. If Redstone needed this property to control the water, the real value could be much higher. I turned back. What happened 4 years ago? Marlo's expression changed. The fire. Yes. Who started it? I don't know. You're lying. He looked at me. I don't know who physically started it. But you know who ordered it. He didn't answer. Elise stepped forward. Marlo, if you were involved in the insurance claim, you need to tell us everything. He nodded slowly. The fire was not supposed to happen. I froze. What does that mean? The original plan was to remove the documents. Who planned that? Redstone. And you helped them? No. Then who? Marlo looked at me. Someone inside the property trust. I felt a chill. Who? Your father's other trustee. I remembered the letter. One protected the land. The other protected you. Who is the other trustee? Marlo hesitated. Your father. He was dead. Not when the trust was created. Who took his place after he died? Marlo didn't answer. I already knew. Was it Vivian? No. Then who? He looked directly at me. Your aunt. I stopped. I didn't have an aunt. At least, I didn't think I did. My father was an only child. Marlo shook his head. That's what he told you. My heart started pounding. My father had a sister? Yes. Where is she? She died before you were born. I couldn't understand. Then how could she be a trustee? She wasn't. Marlo looked at Elise. Elise seemed confused too. Then who? Marlo reached into a drawer. He pulled out a very old document. He placed it in front of me. The name was Patricia Bellamy, my father's sister. But the signature underneath wasn't hers. Marlo pointed to it. That's the problem. I stared at the signature. It's forged. Yes. Who forged it? Your father believed it was someone at Redstone. But why would they use my aunt's name? Because your father had transferred the trust into her name temporarily. Why? To make the property appear unrelated to him. I sat down. This was becoming impossible to follow. Marlo explained that my father had created layers of ownership because Redstone was already attempting to purchase surrounding land. If his name remained publicly connected to the property, they could pressure him directly. So the property moved through a temporary trust. Then my father's health deteriorated. He transferred the beneficial interest to me. But he never recorded the transfer publicly. That meant the county records were incomplete. That's why they say I own it. Yes. But Redstone doesn't know? They know someone does. Then why the fire? Marlo looked down. Because someone believed the records could prove the trust existed. They wanted to destroy the evidence. Yes. Did they succeed? No. I stared at him. What? The records burned. Then how do we know all this? Marlo gave a faint smile. Because your father made copies. I remembered the blue folder. The folder. Yes. I opened it again. There were several pages I hadn't examined closely. One was a survey map. Another was a legal agreement. And another was a list of names. At the bottom was a handwritten sentence. If the original records disappear, the copies become the evidence. I looked at Marlo. You knew? Yes. And Vivian knew? Yes. Who else? He didn't answer. Then there was a knock at the front door. June went to answer it. A few seconds later, we heard her call Marlo's name. He stood. Then he looked at me. Don't move. The front door opened. A man's voice came from the hallway. Mr. Pierce? Marlo's face went pale. He whispered. That's Redstone. I immediately reached for my phone. Marlowe shook his head. No. Why? Because if they're here, they know you've found the folder. Footsteps approached. Then June appeared in the doorway. She looked frightened. There are 2 men outside. Marlowe walked toward her. He spoke quietly. Tell them I'm not home. One of the men called from outside. We know you're here. Marlowe stopped. Then the man added. We also know Harold's daughter is with you. I felt every muscle in my body tighten. They knew I was there. They knew about the folder. And apparently, they knew enough about my father to know exactly where to look. Marlowe turned toward me. Now you understand why your father kept this from you. I whispered, what do they want? He looked at the blue folder. Not the property. Then what? The evidence that proves who controls the water. A second knock shook the front door. Then someone shouted, Claire Bellamy, you need to come outside. I looked at Elise. She immediately called the local authorities. Marlowe moved toward a hidden cabinet behind the bookshelves. He pulled out another folder. It was much older than mine. This, he said, is the document your father spent 7 years trying to protect. I looked at the front door, then at the folder. What is it? Marlowe opened it. Inside was a map, but not a map of the property. It showed the entire underground water basin. Red lines marked the flow, and in the center was Hawthorne Creek. At the bottom of the map was a handwritten statement. No private company may control the recharge zone. I looked at Marlowe. Who wrote that? He didn't answer. He simply turned the page. There was a signature underneath. Harold Bellamy. And beside it was another signature. One I had never seen before. Marlowe said quietly, Your father wasn't the only person who knew the truth. I stared at the second signature. It belonged to someone named Elias Mercer. I had never heard the name. Who is Elias Mercer? Marlowe looked toward the window. He was the county hydrologist. He died 6 years ago. Was he working with my father? Yes. What did they discover? Marlowe placed the map on the table. The underground basin isn't confined to Hawthorne Creek. He traced the red lines with his finger. It extends beneath 3 counties. I leaned closer. And this section? That is the recharge zone. The property? Hawthorne Creek is the largest privately controlled parcel inside it. So if someone owns the property, they don't own the entire water system. But they can influence it. Exactly. Elise looked at the map. That's why Redstone has been buying surrounding parcels. Marlowe nodded. They wanted enough land to control the wells, drainage systems, and access points. But why build houses? Because the development gives them the legal justification to control the infrastructure. I felt sick. So the housing project was only part of the plan. Yes. What would happen if they controlled the recharge zone? Marlowe hesitated. Several towns could become dependent on their water system. I looked at Elise. That sounds like something the state would stop. It should, she said. Then why hasn't anyone stopped it? Because nobody had the complete evidence. Marlowe pointed at the map. Until now. I asked him about Elias Mercer. He explained that Mercer had discovered unusual groundwater movement beneath Hawthorne Creek in the early 1990s. My father had funded part of his independent research because the county wouldn't. Eventually, they discovered that the aquifer was connected to several municipal water systems. Mercer wanted the county to designate the area as protected groundwater infrastructure. Redstone opposed the proposal. The disagreement became political. Then Mercer died unexpectedly. My father continued the research alone. Years later, he created the trust. I looked at the map again. So the trust wasn't really about protecting the property. No, it was about protecting the water. Yes. Then I remembered the anonymous caller. The records weren't evidence of what happened. They were evidence of what was going to happen. I asked Marlowe if he knew who had called me. He shook his head. I suspected someone would contact you. Who? I don't know. Then why did they know about the folder? Marlowe looked uncomfortable. Because the folder wasn't the only copy. What? There are 3. I felt my heart race. Where? One with me. He pointed at the folder. One with Vivian. And the third. Marlowe looked at Elise. Your father gave it to a government official. Who? Elias Mercer. But he's dead. Yes. Then where's his copy? Marlowe said nothing. I realized something. You don't know. No. Then how do you know there were 3? Your father told me. Before he died? Yes. Did he tell you where the third copy was? Marlowe shook his head. He said only one sentence. What? If they ever find the third copy, the land won't matter anymore. I didn't understand. Why? Because the third copy contains something that can stop the entire development. What? A water protection covenant. Elise immediately understood. If it's valid, Redstone can't legally develop the recharge zone. Exactly. I stared at the map. That meant the property wasn't the real prize. The legal document was. Without it, Redstone could keep fighting. With it, their entire development could collapse. Suddenly, the $180,000 insurance payment made sense in a different way. If someone destroyed the records, they needed to make the destruction look legitimate. The insurance payment created a clean explanation. Old records were destroyed. The insurer paid. The matter was closed. Except I had received the money, which meant the insurance company had unknowingly created a trail directly back to me. I asked Marlowe why he had filed the claim. I didn't. But the signature is yours. No. I showed him the paperwork. He studied it. Then he smiled sadly. That's not my current signature. What? Look at the date. I did. The claim had been filed 4 years earlier. Marlowe's signature looked almost identical to his old legal signature. But there was one difference. His middle initial was missing. He had started using it after retiring. I asked him whether someone could have copied his old signature. Yes. Who? Anyone who had access to my old files. Redstone. Possibly. Then Elise noticed something else. The claim was filed through an insurance broker. Who? She pointed to the document. Bellwether Insurance Services. I recognized the name. My father had used them. Marlowe had too. We searched the company records. The broker had been sold 2 years earlier. The original owner was retired. But the employee who handled the Hawthorne Creek policy 4 years ago was still working in the industry. Her name was Celine Ward. Elise called her. Celine agreed to meet us. We drove to a small cafe outside town. She arrived carrying a folder. The moment she saw me, she said, I wondered when you'd come looking. I asked her why. Because the claim never made sense. What didn't make sense? The policy. She explained that the policy was unusually specific. It covered historical documents and research materials connected to the Hawthorne Creek property. But the policy had been amended shortly before the fire. Who requested the amendment? Your father. He had been dead for 3 years. Celine looked at me. No. I felt confused. He signed the amendment. That's impossible. She opened the folder. The amendment was dated 3 months before the fire. The signature looked like my father's. But my father had been dead for 3 years. I stared at it. Someone forged his signature. Yes. Did you report it? I tried. To whom? The company. What happened? They told me the policy had already been approved. Who approved it? Celine looked at Elise. Marlowe Pierce. I turned toward Marlowe. He looked devastated. I didn't approve that amendment. Then who did? I don't know. Celine continued. There was something else. What? The amendment increased the coverage from $40,000 to $180,000. My eyes went to the check. Exactly $180,000. So whoever arranged the amendment already knew the amount they wanted. Yes. Before the fire. Yes. I asked Celine the question that had been bothering me since the beginning. Who filed the claim? She looked at me. You did. I wasn't there. I know. Then who? Celine opened another document. The claim had been submitted electronically. The digital account belonged to a law firm. Pierce and Lowell. Marlowe's old firm. I looked at him. You said you didn't file it. I didn't. Who had access? He closed his eyes. There were only 3 people. Who? Myself. My former partner. And my office manager. Names? Lowell is dead. The office manager? Marlowe hesitated. Her name was Cora Venn. I wrote it down. Where is she? She retired. Where? He shook his head. I don't know. Elise searched public records. Cora Venn had moved to Nevada. She had worked for Pierce and Lowell for 26 years. And there was something else. 3 months before the fire, she had received a payment from a company connected to Redstone Development. The amount was $65,000. I looked at Marlowe. That's our connection. Maybe. No. I pointed at the records. That's not a coincidence. Marlowe didn't argue. We contacted Cora. She refused to speak to us. Then, surprisingly, she called me that night. I know what you're looking for, she said. The insurance claim? No. The third copy? Silence. My heart started racing. You know where it is? Yes. Where? I can't tell you over the phone. Why? Because someone is listening. I looked around the hotel room. Who? I don't know. Then why call me? Because I made a mistake. What mistake? I helped create the claim. My hands tightened around the phone. Why? I was told it was legitimate. By whom? I can't say. You took money. I was threatened. What kind of threat? She immediately corrected me. Not a threat. A warning. I remembered the wording my father had used. I asked her what the warning was. She said, "They told me if I didn't help prepare the paperwork, my daughter would lose her job." I felt my anger soften. Who told you? Redstone's attorney. Which attorney? She didn't answer. Instead, she gave me an address. Go there tomorrow morning. What is it? An abandoned municipal archive. Why? Because that's where Elias Mercer stored the original water survey. I froze. The third copy? Yes. Is it still there? I don't know. Then why send me? Because someone else is going there tonight. The call ended. I looked at Elise. We need to go. She shook her head. No. What? We don't know who else is involved. But if that document disappears, we need the authorities. She was right. We contacted a state investigator we'd been referred to by a county official. His name was Dorian Chase. He listened to everything. Then he said something unexpected. We've been watching Redstone for 2 years. I stared at him. Why? Environmental complaints. Then why didn't anyone investigate? We did. And? We couldn't prove intent. I showed him the documents. His expression changed. This could be enough. Enough for what? To stop the development. That was the first moment I felt hope. But Dorian warned us not to go anywhere near the archive. We'll handle it. I agreed. But around midnight, I woke up to my phone vibrating. It was Cora. I answered. Her voice was barely audible. They found the archive. Who? Redstone. Did they take the document? I don't know. Where are you? She gave me an address. Then she whispered. There's something you need to know about your father. What? He didn't die believing the property was safe. My heart stopped. What are you saying? He knew someone close to him had betrayed him. Who? She started crying. Then she said, your father suspected Marlowe. The line went dead. I turned toward Elise. Marlowe was asleep in the adjoining room. For the first time, I wondered whether the man my father trusted to protect the land had actually been the person working against him. I didn't wake Marlowe immediately. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, staring at my phone. Your father suspected Marlowe. Those 5 words had changed everything. For the past few days, Marlowe had been the one person who seemed to know the answers. He had explained the trust. He had shown us the water map. He had admitted hiding the property from me. He had even told us about the 3rd copy of the documents. But now Cora was telling me that my father had suspected him. I quietly woke Elise. She sat up immediately. What happened? I told her. She didn't react for several seconds. Then she asked, did Cora say why? No. Did she say what Marlowe had done? No. Only that my father suspected him. Elise looked toward the adjoining room. We need to be careful. I know. Don't confront him yet. Agreed. We contacted Dorian Chase. He arrived at the hotel before sunrise. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting. Then he asked, where is Pierce? Asleep. Dorian looked at Elise. Did he know about the archive? Yes. Did he know Cora had contacted Claire? I don't know. Dorian thought for a moment. Then don't tell him about Cora's call. We waited until morning. When Marlowe joined us for breakfast, he looked exhausted. I watched him carefully. He seemed completely normal. He asked whether we'd heard from Cora. I almost dropped my coffee. How did you know we were trying to reach her? Marlowe stopped. You told me yesterday. No, I didn't. Elise looked at me. Marlowe's face changed. Then he sighed. I overheard you speaking to her. You weren't in the room. I was awake. You were standing outside? Yes. Why? I wanted to know whether she was telling you the truth. I stared at him. Did she? Marlowe didn't answer. Dorian finally spoke. Mr. Pierce, did Harold Bellamy ever tell you he suspected you? Marlowe looked at him. Yes. The answer stunned me. When? Several months before his death. Why? Because someone had accessed the trust documents. Did he think you did it? At first. Did you? No. Then why would he suspect you? Because my name was on every document. Marlowe explained that his law firm had prepared most of the original trust paperwork. He had access to the property files. He knew the value of the land. He knew about the water basin. And he had been the only person outside my father who understood how the trust worked. That made him the obvious suspect. So why did my father keep trusting you? Marlowe looked down. Because I proved I wasn't the person who betrayed him. How? I found the first evidence of Redstone's involvement. He told us that 3 months before my father's death, he discovered payments from a Redstone subsidiary to an employee at the county planning department. The payments were disguised as consulting fees. My father wanted to expose it, but Marlowe advised him to wait. Why? Because we didn't have enough evidence. Did he listen? No. Marlowe smiled sadly. That was Harold. My father had never been good at waiting. He wanted the truth immediately. Marlowe said my father eventually confronted Redstone's representatives. That's when the company made its final offer. $2.4 million. My father refused. Then the offers became less friendly. Not threats. Warnings. They told him the property would become difficult to manage. They warned him about taxes. They suggested he might lose money by holding it. They even tried to convince him that the land had no real commercial value. My father still refused. Then he created the trust. But there was one thing he never told Marlowe. He had already made a second arrangement. With the state. Dorian confirmed it. He pulled a document from his briefcase. It was a preliminary environmental protection agreement. My father's name was on it. So was Elias Mercer's. And there was a third signature. Someone from the State Water Authority. If the agreement became official, the recharge zone could receive protected status. Redstone's development would become almost impossible. I asked why the agreement hadn't been completed. Dorian said, because the final survey was missing. The third copy. Yes, the one in the archive. Exactly. Everything suddenly made sense. Redstone didn't need to own the property immediately. They needed to prevent the state from proving the environmental significance of the land. Without the survey, the protection agreement couldn't be finalized. And if the survey disappeared, Redstone could keep moving forward. I asked Dorian about the archive. He told me his team had arrived there. The door had been forced open. Several boxes were missing. But they found no evidence of the original survey. Then they took it. Maybe. What else could have happened? Dorian looked at me. Someone could have moved it before they arrived. Who? That is what we're trying to determine. Then he showed me a photograph. The archive had an old security camera. The footage showed someone entering at 1:37 a.m. The person was wearing a dark coat. Their face wasn't visible. But the walk was familiar. A slight limp. I looked at Dorian. Calder. He nodded. Who is Calder? Marlowe answered before Dorian could. Redstone's former property consultant. I remembered the name from one of my father's notes. Calder had apparently handled several land purchases years earlier. Where is he now? Dorian said, we don't know. Then his phone rang. He listened for a few seconds. Understood. He ended the call. Calder was seen near the archive. What did he take? We don't know. I asked whether he was working for Redstone. Dorian said he used to. Used to? He left the company 4 years ago. The same year as the fire. Yes. I looked at Marlowe. Do you know him? Yes. Did my father know him? Yes. Did he trust him? No. That answer came quickly. I asked why. Marlowe said, because Calder was the person who first tried to convince your father to sell. Then why would he be at the archive? I don't know. We decided to return to Hawthorne Creek. Dorian wanted to inspect the property himself. When we arrived, I saw the house for the first time. It looked completely different from the photograph. The paint had faded. The porch was covered with leaves. The creek behind the property was swollen from recent rain. But the house was still standing. I walked through the front door. For the first time, I felt that I was actually entering something my father had left me. Not a document. Not a bank account. A place. There was dust everywhere. Most rooms were empty. But the fireplace was still there. And on the mantel sat the brass clock from the photograph. I touched it. The hands had stopped at 4:17. I remembered my father standing beside this clock. For a moment, I could almost imagine him there. Then Elise called from the hallway. Claire. I walked over. She was standing beside a wall. Look. There was a small wooden panel near the floor. It didn't match the rest of the wall. Dorian examined it. It looks like an access hatch. He opened it. Behind it was a narrow compartment. Inside was an envelope. My name was written on it. My hands started shaking. I opened it. There was another letter from my father. This one was shorter. Claire, if you found this, the trust survived. But don't trust the documents in the blue folder completely. They tell you what the land is worth. They don't tell you who controls it. The answer is under the house. Do not dig. Find the original survey first. I looked at Elise. The original survey is here? Maybe. We searched the room. Nothing. Then Dorian noticed something. The fireplace. He examined the stonework. There's a cavity behind this. He carefully removed one loose stone. Inside was a metal tube. It was sealed. We opened it. Inside was a rolled map. Elise unfolded it across the floor. It was old. Very old. But it wasn't the survey. It was a property map showing underground drainage channels. At the bottom was another note. Water remembers where it came from. Dorian stared at it. What does that mean? I didn't know. Then Elise pointed to a marking. A blue line ran from the creek beneath the house and continued toward a neighboring property. What is that? Dorian looked closely. An underground channel. Natural. Probably. Then he noticed another marking. A red circle. What? He looked at me. This is a well site. Whose? He checked the coordinates. Redstone. I felt a chill. There's a redstone well underneath my property? Not exactly. He pointed to the boundary. The well is outside your property. Then why is it marked here? Because the groundwater moves beneath both parcels. That was the whole problem. Redstone didn't need to own my land. They needed access to the water moving beneath it. Then we heard a sound outside. A car door. Dorian immediately motioned for us to stay quiet. We moved toward the window. A black SUV was parked near the driveway. Someone got out. It was Calder. He walked toward the house. Dorian quietly stepped outside. Calder. The man stopped. He looked at Dorian. Then at me. His expression changed. You found the house. Yes. He looked at the fireplace through the window. Then he said something unexpected. Your father was wrong. About what? About who the real danger was. I stepped outside. What does that mean? Calder looked at Marlowe. You should ask him. Marlowe came out behind me. Calder's expression hardened. You lied to her. Marlowe didn't respond. Calder continued. You told Harold you would protect the land. I did. You didn't. I protected Claire. You hid the property from her. To keep her safe. Calder laughed bitterly. That's what you told yourself. I stepped between them. Stop. They both looked at me. I want the truth. Calder looked directly at me. Your father created the trust because he thought Redstone wanted the water. Didn't they? They did. Then what's the problem? The water isn't the only thing underneath this property. I felt my stomach tighten. What else is there? Calder looked at the house. Something your father found shortly before he died. What? He shook his head. You need to ask Marlowe. I turned toward Marlowe. He looked away. Tell me. He didn't. Tell me what my father found. Finally, Marlowe spoke. A second aquifer. What? A deeper one. Dorian's face changed. How deep? Nearly 3,000 feet. That's impossible, Dorian said. Marlowe shook his head. It's real. I asked why it mattered. Marlowe looked at me. Because the deeper aquifer is clean. I didn't understand. Clean enough for what? Municipal use. Dorian suddenly understood. If Redstone gets access to that water, they could supply the entire development. And sell the water. Yes. I looked at Calder. Is that why you're here? No. Then why? He reached into his jacket. Dorian immediately raised a hand. Slowly. Calder pulled out a small envelope. He handed it to me. I found this in the archive. I opened it. Inside was a photograph of my father with Elias Mercer. Behind them was a third man. I recognized him. Marlowe. But there was something else in the photograph. A folder on the table. Stamped with a state seal. Calder said quietly. That is the original protection agreement. My heart raced. You found it? Yes. Then where is it? He looked at me. I gave it to someone I trusted. Who? He didn't answer. Instead, he looked at Marlowe. Marlowe's face went pale. Calder said. Your father trusted the wrong person once. Then he walked back toward his SUV. I shouted after him. Who is the agreement? He stopped. Without turning around, he said. Ask yourself why Marlowe never told you that your father had already signed it. Then he drove away. I turned toward Marlowe. He didn't look at me. Dorian stepped closer. Mr. Pierce. Marlowe finally raised his eyes. Did Harold sign the protection agreement? Yes. Was it legally valid? Yes. Then why didn't you tell Claire? Marlowe's voice was barely audible. Because Harold changed his mind. I stared at him. My father changed his mind? No. Marlowe looked at me. He was forced to. By whom? Marlowe swallowed. By the person who had the original agreement. I asked the question. Who? He looked toward the road where Calder had disappeared. Then he said, your father's sister. I froze. My aunt was dead. Marlowe shook his head. No. She died before I was born. That is what your father wanted you to believe. I stared at Marlowe. My aunt is alive? He nodded slowly. Her name is Patricia Bellamy. I couldn't move. That isn't possible. I know what you were told. My father told me she died. Yes. Then why are you saying she's alive? Because she changed her name. Why? Marlo looked at Dorian. Because Harold helped her disappear. I felt as if the floor had shifted beneath me. Why would my father help his own sister disappear? Because Patricia was the first person Redstone approached. I sat down on the porch. Marlo explained that Patricia had worked in county planning in the early 1990s. She knew about the underground water system before almost anyone else. Redstone discovered that knowledge and tried to recruit her. At first, she refused. Then her husband became seriously ill. Medical bills began piling up. Redstone offered her money. She accepted. But instead of giving them everything they wanted, Patricia secretly passed information to my father. That was how Harold first learned how valuable the groundwater was. When Redstone discovered what she had done, Marlo said, they threatened to expose her. So my father helped her disappear. Yes. He told everyone she died? Not everyone. Then why didn't I know? Because you were a child. I looked at him. My father could have told me later. He planned to. When? When you were old enough to understand what was at stake. But he died. Marlo nodded. And after that, I kept the secret. I felt angry. You don't get to decide what I deserve to know. I know. Then why did you? Because Patricia was still being watched. Dorian interrupted. Where is she now? Marlo looked toward the road. New Mexico. I immediately thought about the anonymous caller. Is she the person who called me? No. Then who? I don't know. Dorian asked, does Patricia have the original protection agreement? Marlo nodded. She did. Did? She gave it to Calder. I looked at him. Why? Because she believed Calder was trying to expose Redstone. Was he? Yes. Then why did he work for Redstone? Because it was the only way he could get close enough to find the evidence. Suddenly the pieces started fitting together. Calder wasn't simply a Redstone consultant. He had been working inside the company while secretly collecting evidence. The fire. The insurance claim. The missing documents. The archive. All of it had been connected. But one thing still didn't make sense. Why did Cora say my father suspected you? Marlo lowered his eyes. Because he did. Did he have a reason? Yes. What? Marlo hesitated. For years before your father's death, I made a mistake. What mistake? I told Redstone that Harold was preparing to file the protection agreement. My heart sank. You told them. I didn't know what they intended to do with the information. What happened? They tried to force him to sell. And you still say you were protecting him? I realized my mistake too late. Then why did he keep you as trustee? Because I spent the rest of my life correcting it. I didn't know what to say. Dorian stepped in. Where is Patricia? Marlo gave him an address. We're going. Before we could leave, my phone rang. It was Cora. I answered. Claire? Yes. Don't go to New Mexico. Why? Because Patricia isn't the person you think she is. My stomach tightened. What does that mean? She didn't give Calder the original agreement. Then who has it? Cora was quiet. Then she said, your father. I almost laughed. My father has been dead for 7 years. I know. Then explain. The original agreement was never transferred. What are you talking about? Your father made 2 copies. We know. No. You know about the copies. She took a breath. You don't know about the original. Where is it? Still at Hawthorne Creek. I looked at Elise. Cora continued. Under the house. I remembered my father's note. The answer is under the house. Where? The old well. There isn't a well. There is. Where? Behind the kitchen. I remembered the property map. The blue line. The old well site. Cora said. Your father sealed it beneath the stone. The call ended. We went inside. Marlo followed us. I looked at him. You knew. He nodded. You knew where the original was. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't know whether you were ready. I've had enough of people deciding that for me. I walked toward the kitchen. Behind the old cabinets was a section of stone floor. Dorian examined it. There. A circular outline was barely visible beneath the dust. We moved the cabinet. Underneath was an old iron cover. It took all 4 of us to lift it. Below was a narrow stone shaft. Not deep. Maybe 15 feet. At the bottom was an old metal container. My heart raced. Dorian climbed down carefully. He retrieved it. The container was sealed with wax. My father's initials were stamped across it. HB. Inside was a folded document wrapped in oilcloth. Elise carefully opened it. The original protection agreement. The state seal was still intact. My father's signature was there. So was Elias Mercer's. And the signature of the state water commissioner. The agreement was legally binding. Redstone couldn't develop the recharge zone without state approval. But there was one more page. Elise read it silently. Then she looked at me. What? This isn't just a protection agreement. What is it? It creates a public conservation trust. What does that mean? If you activate it, the land becomes protected. Protected from redstone? Protected from private development altogether. I stared at the document. So I can't sell it. No. Can I live there? Yes. Can I lease it? Under restrictions. Can I profit from it? Not in the traditional sense. I suddenly understood. My father hadn't left me a fortune. He had left me responsibility. The property might be worth millions on the open market. But if I activated the trust, it could never become the centerpiece of a private development. I asked Elise the most important question. What happens if I don't activate it? Redstone can continue challenging the ownership. And if they win? You could lose the property. Then why would my father give me this choice? Marlowe answered. Because he wanted you to choose. I looked at him. For the first time, he actually gave me the choice. Yes. Then Dorian received a message. He read it. His expression changed. What's wrong? Redstone just filed an emergency development application. When? An hour ago. I looked at the document. They knew we found it. Dorian nodded. They've probably been waiting. I asked how. He showed me the filing. Redstone had submitted a claim arguing that the conservation agreement was invalid because the state commissioner who signed it had exceeded his authority. If they won, the agreement could be challenged. Can they do that? Yes. Then what stops them? The original survey. The third copy. Yes. But we still don't have it. Dorian looked at the document in my hands. Maybe you do. I didn't understand. He pointed to the bottom of the protection agreement. There was a reference number. A survey archive number. The same number appeared on the map we'd found in the house. I suddenly realized something. The third copy wasn't a separate document. It was the survey itself. The map was incomplete without the original measurements. And those measurements were probably hidden somewhere in the property records. We searched the house again. This time, we found a locked drawer beneath the staircase. Inside was an old field notebook. Elias Mercer's handwriting covered every page. Measurements, coordinates, water pressure, and a final entry dated 6 days before my father died. Protection agreement signed. Original survey secured. Patricia is safe. Harold believes the danger has passed. Then another entry. 3 days later. Harold no longer trusts Pierce. I looked at Marlowe. He didn't deny it. The final page was dated 2 days before my father's death. Someone accessed the archive. Below it. If anything happens to me, Claire must never be told until the agreement can be enforced. I felt tears in my eyes. My father had known. He had known someone was coming after the documents. He had known I might be dragged into it. But there was one final sentence. It changed everything. Pierce is not the betrayer. I was wrong. Marlowe closed his eyes. I looked at him. My father realized you weren't responsible. Yes. Then who was? Marlowe didn't answer. Elise turned the page. There was another name. Cora Venn. I stared at it. The office manager? Marlowe nodded. She had access to every file. And she worked with Redstone. Yes. But she said she was pressured. She was. Then why would my father call her the betrayer? Marlowe pointed to the final line. Because she wasn't working alone. I looked at the page. A second name appeared underneath Cora's. Patricia Bellamy. My aunt. I couldn't breathe. That's impossible. Marlowe shook his head. Your father discovered that Patricia had been secretly communicating with Redstone again. But you said she helped him. She did. Then why betray him? She believed the protection agreement would destroy her family financially. I couldn't understand. Her family? Patricia had children. I stared at him. She had a family I knew nothing about. Marlowe continued. Redstone offered them a settlement if Patricia helped invalidate the trust. And she agreed? Partially. What does that mean? She gave them information. But not the agreement. No. She tried to stop them? Yes. So she wasn't the villain. No. Then who was? Marlowe looked at me. The person who used Patricia's information to locate the original survey. Who? He hesitated. Then my phone rang. This time, the caller ID showed a New Mexico number. I answered. A woman's voice said. Claire. Yes. My name is Patricia Bellamy. I couldn't speak. She continued. I know what Marlowe told you. Then you know about the agreement. Yes. Did you betray my father? No. Did you work with Redstone? Yes. My heart sank. But I did it to protect you. Why? Because your father was wrong about one thing. What? Redstone wasn't trying to take the water. I froze. Then what were they trying to take? Patricia's voice became quiet. They were trying to take something your father discovered beneath the water. I couldn't speak. Something beneath the water. That was the sentence that finally made every other piece of the story feel incomplete. I asked Patricia, what did my father discover? She said, a geological formation. That doesn't explain anything. It will. She told me that years earlier, Elias Mercer had discovered unusual pressure readings beneath the deeper aquifer. At first, they thought it was simply an underground geological structure. Then they realized it contained something else. A rare mineral deposit. Not gold. Not oil. Something far more valuable to the companies involved. A naturally occurring lithium-bearing formation. The estimated value was enormous. Redstone had discovered the deposit through private geological surveys. That was when their interest in Hawthorne Creek changed. They no longer wanted the land simply for water access. They wanted the mineral rights beneath it. I looked at Elise. She was already staring at me. Patricia continued. Your father believed the mineral deposit should never be privately controlled without environmental review. So he created the Conservation Trust. Yes, but why didn't he tell the state? He tried. What happened? Redstone challenged the geological findings. They argued that the deposit was too deep to be economically viable. Without additional drilling, the state wouldn't act. My father refused to allow drilling, because drilling through the aquifer could contaminate the groundwater system. That was why the protection agreement mattered. It prevented private drilling until an independent environmental study could be completed. I asked Patricia why she had ever worked with Redstone. Because I wanted access to their geological data. You infiltrated them? Yes. Did my father know? At first. And later. He thought I had betrayed him. I finally understood why my father's records were contradictory. Patricia had been secretly gathering evidence. But from my father's perspective, she appeared to be helping Redstone. He didn't know the entire story. I asked her about the fire. I didn't order it. Did Redstone? Yes. Why? They wanted the original geological records destroyed. And the insurance claim? That was arranged afterward. Why? To make the fire look like a financial loss rather than deliberate destruction. I looked at the $180,000 check. So the money was meant to close the matter. Yes. But why was it sent to me? Because your father had named you as beneficiary. Did you know? Yes. Then why didn't you tell me? Because your father made me promise. I closed my eyes. For 7 years, everyone around me had been protecting a secret I never agreed to keep. But there was still one major question. Who forged my signature? Patricia said, Cora. Why? She was trying to help Redstone locate the original survey. But she said she was pressured. She was. Then why tell me the truth? Because she realized what Redstone planned to do. What? After the fire, they wanted to reopen the land for drilling. And she changed her mind. Yes. I looked at the documents. The original protection agreement was still in my hands. The final survey was still missing. Without it, Redstone could argue that the agreement had been based on incomplete information. Patricia said, the survey isn't in the archive. Where is it? Your father hid it. Where? Inside the old clock. I looked at the brass clock on the fireplace mantel. The clock from the photograph. I picked it up. It was heavier than it should have been. I turned it over. There was a small screw beneath the back panel. I removed it. Inside was a narrow compartment. A rolled piece of paper was hidden there. The original geological survey. I couldn't believe it. My father had hidden the most important document inside, something I had seen in his photograph for years. Elise carefully unrolled it. The survey confirmed everything. The deeper aquifer existed. The lithium-bearing formation existed. And the recharge zone extended beneath Hawthorne Creek. More importantly, the report recommended that the entire area be protected from private drilling. Dorian looked at the document. This is enough. For what? To stop Redstone. He immediately contacted the State Water Authority. Within hours, the development application was frozen. Redstone's attorneys challenged the decision. But this time, the state had the original survey. They couldn't argue that the evidence was incomplete. Then something happened that I never expected. Marlowe admitted that he had been the person who filed the insurance claim. I looked at him. You said you didn't. I didn't file it personally. What does that mean? I gave Cora access to the old firm files. Why? To create a record showing the documents had financial value. So you knew about the claim? Yes. And you let me believe you didn't? Yes. Why? Because if Redstone believed the insurance payment closed the matter, they would stop looking for the records. I was angry. You manipulated me. I know. But you also protected the evidence. Yes. I didn't know how to feel about him. For years, He had lied to me. But every lie had apparently been designed to protect the same thing my father had spent his life protecting. The land, the water, and eventually me. The investigation continued for months. Redstone was eventually barred from drilling in the protected area. Several former executives faced legal action over the attempted destruction of records and improper land transactions. Cora cooperated fully. She admitted preparing the insurance documents. She also provided investigators with emails showing that Redstone had pressured her. Patricia returned to Arizona. I met her at Hawthorne Creek. The first time I saw her, I understood why my father had hidden her existence. She looked like him. Same eyes. Same smile. Same habit of touching her chin when she was thinking. For a few minutes, neither of us said anything. Then she hugged me. I cried. Not because I was angry. Because I had spent my entire life believing my father had no siblings. And suddenly I had an aunt. A whole missing branch of my family. We talked for hours. She told me about my father when they were young. How they used to explore the creek. How he would bring home strange rocks. How they had once built a small wooden bridge across the water. For the first time, my father became more than the man I remembered. He had been a brother, a son, a stubborn friend, and a man who had spent years trying to protect something bigger than himself. Eventually, the state finalized the conservation trust. The land could no longer be sold for private development. I remained the legal beneficiary, but the property became protected land. I couldn't sell it for millions. I couldn't turn it into a luxury development. But I could live there, and I could preserve it. I decided to do exactly that. Nolan wasn't thrilled at first. Moving 90 miles away from everything we knew wasn't easy. But after we visited the property together, he changed his mind. We repaired the house. We restored the porch. We cleaned the old barn. And we kept the brass clock exactly where my father had left it. The $180,000 check was deposited into a protected account. Part of it went toward restoring the property. The rest was placed into a conservation fund. I didn't become rich from the property. In fact, financially, I probably would have made more money if I had simply sold it. But I didn't regret the decision. Because I finally understood what my father had been trying to leave me. It wasn't a fortune. It was a responsibility. A few months later, I received one final letter. It came from my father's attorney. Inside was a handwritten note. It had been prepared years earlier but never delivered. Claire, if you've reached this point, you probably think I kept too much from you. You're right. I did. I told myself secrecy was protection. Sometimes it was. Sometimes it was simply fear. I was afraid that if you knew what this land meant, you'd spend your life worrying about protecting it. I wanted you to have an ordinary life. I'm sorry I couldn't give you the truth sooner. But if the day comes when you have to choose between what something is worth and what it is worth protecting, I hope you choose wisely. The money can always be replaced. Some things cannot. I read the letter several times. Then I walked outside. The sun was setting over Hawthorne Creek. The water moved quietly beneath the old bridge. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was standing on a property I had inherited. I felt like I was standing inside a decision my father had trusted me to make. And I finally understood why the insurance company had sent me that strange $180,000 check. It wasn't simply compensation. It was the first piece of a trail. A trail that led me to a property I never knew I owned. A family secret I never knew existed. A geological discovery worth millions. And a responsibility that turned out to be worth more than the money. Looking back, the strangest part wasn't that someone had used my identity. It wasn't the forged documents. It wasn't even the hidden survey. It was the fact that for 7 years, everyone around me believed they were protecting me by keeping me away from the truth. But eventually, the truth found me anyway. It arrived in an envelope, with my name on it, and a check for $180,000 that I had never asked for. I still have the original check stub. I keep it in the same box as my father's letters. Not because of the amount. Because every time I see it, I remember the morning I thought someone had made a mistake. They hadn't. The check was never really the beginning of the story. It was the invitation to finally discover it. And if I had simply deposited the money and walked away, I might have spent the rest of my life believing my father left me a forgotten piece of land. Instead, I learned why he protected it. Why people lied about it. Why someone tried to destroy the records. And why, in the end, the most valuable thing underneath that property wasn't the mineral deposit at all. It was the truth. If you suddenly received $180,000 from an insurance company for a property you never knew you owned, and discovering the truth meant giving up millions of dollars in potential profit, would you keep the money or protect the land?